This is the Amp Hour podcast, released April 26, 2021, episode number 539, The King of Trash with Big Clive. Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Dave Jones from the EEV blog.
And I'm Big Clive from bigclive.com.
Hey, Big Clive. Nobody's heard of you, mate.
No, they haven't. I'm the trashy channel.
The trashy.
Yeah.
The trashy junk channel. The preeminent.
Yep, you're the Rolls Royce channel. I'm the quad smashed into a tree channel.
Hardly Rolls Royce. I'm just like, just like the Toyota Corolla of, channels, I think, aren't I?
So who is the Rolls Royce channel then? Oh, that's a tricky one.
Oh, I don't know.
Does Electro Boom hold that title for just being so huge?
Electro Boom, Great Scott, maybe,
Great
with
Scott,
all,
definitely.
the flashy production,
With his highbrow.
and all the scripts. And
absolutely.
Yes, we hereby decree the Rolls Royce tag onto Great Scott.
Okay, that's reasonable enough.
This is great. Anyway, thanks for joining us, Clive.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
You just got hot off a live stream every week, do you?
Yes, it was a sneaky little behind-the-scenes Patreon live stream, and it wasn't root this time, so it probably will get released. Sometimes it goes over the boundary and I can't release it to general viewing. But there is a live stream every Saturday on Big Clive Live. I keep it separate. I can't do it in the same channel because everybody has this image that I'm some lovely old man with male patterned baldness who wears a business suit while I'm recording the videos sort of BBC style. And then they see me and it's like, oh, we are disappointed. So I had to go Big Clive Live. It's for the face videos.
Right. Do you get many people surprised by how you look, the big bushy goatee? Because most of the time you don't appear on camera, right? You're just the hands with the top-down camera shot.
Indeed. Talking hands, as people describe the videos.
Right.
Whenever I may do a face video, it results usually on the main channel in a sudden flurry of unsubscribers. So I'm not really sure that's a good sign. That's why I ended up. Although recently I made the video, which is basically just scraping the edge of legality. I distilled a bottle of whiskey and just spoofed it up and did it all clickbaity style. And it's actually resulted in a huge surge of subscribers. So it's very random.
Nice.
The internet is so strange.
Well, that's the definition of your channel, isn't it? Skirting the boundaries of legality.
Absolutely, yes.
Is there any stuff you've had taken down?
Right now, I can't really think of stuff I've actually had to take down. Have I had any? I've had lots of videos flagged. Remember in the early days when they used to just orchestrated flagging was a bit of an issue before YouTube had basically evolved to the point that they recognized that some disgruntled minorities will just basically orchestrate. You've had that as well, haven't you?
Of course, yeah.
You've had that when you've basically revealed spoof products or basically fraudulent products, and you've had orchestrated attacks on you. The only things I've had have been things like that where people have been very upset and they've basically organized group flagging.
What were they upset about generally? Is there a consistent theme?
There is one video that I had, the only video I've ever had to disable comments on, and it was the 5G video. And it brought the anti-5Gers. That resulted in tracking down my phone number and then aggressive calls during the night and
really
bulk spam, bulk addition to university mailing lists, attempted bulk additions. And it was just very unpleasant for a while.
Wow, I didn't get that with mine because I've done 5G video. I didn't, I got some in the comments, but I didn't get anything more than usual, I guess.
I think it may have been because I called someone out because they were making videos about the 5G death beam street lamps. And I don't know if they were doing it because they wanted to cash in on this. You can basically, the conspiracy industry is an industry. They make a lot of money out of doing the conspiracy videos. But this guy was showing the insides of streetlights and pointing out all the components like the 400
I remember that. Yeah, that was hilarious.
the 400-volt capacitor and saying, "Why do they need 400 volts? It's for death beams." So that's why on my videos, if I'm looking at a power supply now, I call it the death beam capacitor because that's obviously what it's for.
I was just dealing with one this morning. Actually, I shot a video. I'm repairing a bloody mains power supply at the moment for a dumpster TV, and I actually forgot that it didn't have a discharge bleed resistor in it, and I
Oh,
was soldering it. I was removing. I got a little bit of a zap. For it, it still had 150 volts on it. It seems so that didn't make it into the video. I wasn't filming at the time that I got my little zap, but didn't. It was like, eh.
you're never filming when these things happen.
No, I know.
I recently deliberately took the discharge resistor off a small capacitor. I mean, it's only about, say, about 6.8 microfarads at 400 volts, but it was left charged up to 240 volts, and it gives you quite a zap, particularly because the contacts are so close together.
Yeah, exactly.
It was an LED lamp, but it seems that every disaster I have happens while the camera's not running. It's just, people have suggested I should have 24/7 CCTV running just so that
Right.
those things could be shown.
Right. Because you're sort of famous for, you used to, you still do, don't you? You shoot this on your phone or your tablet or whatever. You don't have any fancy cameras. You don't even really edit on a real computer,
I
do you?
don't. Everything gets done on the phone. Right at the moment, it's a Moto G7 Power, which is actually getting a bit long in the tooth now. But it's just the camera is so good, and the apps have evolved now. It used to be the apps were terrible. There was very little editing facility, but now you can fairly
Mm.
accurately trim videos, splice them together, do basic splicing, and most importantly of all these days, you can adjust the audio. There's a app
Yep.
called Audio Fix that just fixes a lot of the problems, just
Magic.
boosts the volume up and just compresses it a little bit just to make it that bit fuller, shall we say.
Right. Ah, so how do you edit with your finger, or do you like hook up a mouse to your?
No,
Is that even possible? I don't know.
I do very little editing. Quite often, it all just goes in. Most of the things I do, if I don't do a video in a single take, using the pause button, if I have to pause
Right.
briefly to do something,
Yep.
if I have to say, for instance, I stopped, take something to bits, take the circuit board out, take photos of it, and then like do the reverse engineer it. If I have to stop,
Mm.
I record it as two sections and then use something like VidTrim Pro just to physically just merge those two sections, just join them end to end. That's about it. There's very little editing.
Yep. Mine's not much more advanced than that. Although, it all drops into the timeline, but I'm starting and stopping all the time. It's like, I'll shoot like 30 seconds or a minute waffling on, or a couple of minutes waffling on, and then I'll stop, and then I'll change camera angle, and I'll, you know,
Yeah.
waffle on about something else. So,
Sometimes I do wonder how many great technical channels don't exist because they took it too seriously and they basically jaded themselves by feeling they
yep.
had to live up to the high BBC expectations.
Right. Yes.
And the ones who listened to their own voice and didn't like it, when in reality, you're the only person who hears your voice that way.
Mm.
It just makes me wonder how many people have just been put off by that and the fact it was so much work that they just put too much work into it. They actually spoiled it for
Yep.
themselves. To me, it's more important to just get content out there.
Yes, exactly. I agree. I kind of put a bit more spit and polish into the editing now. Like, I'll go through two passes or whatever to make it, to sort of condense it, take out any ums and ahs, and just,
Yeah.
save a minute of people's lives. If it's a 31-minute video, I'll get it down to 29 minutes or something, just
Yeah.
to, yeah. I've got a friend, Carl von Moller, who's done an Australian documentary series. It's all on YouTube about the electronics industry here, and he came and visited me 10 years ago, and he's still releasing and shot that footage like 10 years ago now, back when I was in the garage, and he's still kind of releasing content to this day because he's a professional filmmaker. So he traveled the country. He spent his own money traveling the country, interviewing all famous industry people and stuff like this. Absolutely fantastic content. And he actually flew to Sydney, and he came to my garage, and he recorded me and everything else.
Uh-huh.
And like dozens and dozens of big name people in the Australian industry, and like all this content. And it just took years and years because he didn't want to release anything that wasn't professional film standard. So he
Yeah.
had to color grade it. He had to get release signed, forms from everyone saying that release, and and he even hired like actors to like recreate scenes and stuff like this. And it's magnificent. Some of his finished product is magnificent, but it's just the amount of effort that went into it. I just went, oh, everyone would be happy with just
Yeah.
just the
But
interviews.
that sounds like mainstream TV production values.
Yes, it is.
That is not how YouTube works. YouTube is someone sticking their phone to a window with
Yeah,
double-sided stickers and
that's
then
it.
using the outside light and then just doing a video, and that's it, just basically just off the cuff.
Well, the key is in the name, YouTube. It's just you
Mhm.
and your dodgy little camera, and that's it.
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah.
It is the future of media.
Yeah, I don't feel the pressure to increase my I don't think I could. I don't think I could, like, make a great Scott, polished video. I don't think it's in me.
Here's the thing, I was thinking about this recently. I find it harder to make videos these days because subliminally, my standards have increased from the early days. Things that didn't bother me in the past do bother me now. And as you go over time, you have to keep reminding yourself that, keep it simple because there's almost an expectation you feel that because your channel's getting bigger, you're supposed to be more professional. And it actually slows you down. It makes things harder. So
Yeah.
sometimes you're better just giving yourself a reality check and saying, this is YouTube, just let it flow, so to speak.
Yep, I agree. Now, we were just briefly discussing before the show how you think that my voice is more suited to YouTube than your dulcet,
Infinitely
magnificent
better.
radio voice.
Well, the
Why
snag
is
about the
that?
radio voice is, well, I've got loads of bass in my voice and it
Yeah.
sounds rich. It sounds like the BBC, but unfortunately, that doesn't work with a mobile phone that has a 10 millimeter speaker in it because that is not suited to boomy, bassy sound.
Yeah.
It's much more suited to your voice, which has the sort of more
High
mid-range
pitched.
frequencies.
Yeah.
Yep, which will sound much better out of a mobile
Right.
device.
I've never, because I don't use my phone to actually, especially the speaker in the phone to actually, watch videos much. I've never really noticed, but yeah, of course, that would be a thing. So yours just sounds muffled, and I definitely have to try it after this.
Indeed,
Hmm.
especially if you look at some of my earlier videos, because for a period of time before I was adding a little bit of processing, it was just far too muffled. You literally couldn't listen to my videos on a mobile device because even with the volume up full, it just sounded dank, so to speak. Great
Wow.
with
Yeah.
headphones.
Oh, okay. Yes, of course. So headphones, no problem. It's just the dinky little speakers. Well, most people use their stupid wireless ear poddy things these days, don't they?
Yes, I'm not that modern.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
me neither. I
yeah.
proudly tweeted a photo of me using a wired set of, earbuds like a few months back. It was like none of this wireless rubbish. So, if people haven't seen your channel, we've talked about it's the trashiest channel on YouTube, is
It
how
is
you
indeed
sort of
utter
promote it.
trash.
Utter
It's
trash because
the the worst stuff I can find on eBay. It's like, if it looks dangerous, I buy it, and it usually lives up to the expectations.
what led to has your channel always been like that? Because you've been around about 7 or 8 years or something, haven't you? What led to the fascination with the cheap Chinese stuff?
Started off with the LED lamps, but then I discovered things like, I think one of the pivotal moments was when I had a string of pink LED fairy lights, and I plugged them into the mains, and the power supply just went bang, and it detonated so forcibly. You know that thing about how fluke meters and other posh meters have that nice deep seam to actually
Yes.
stop the flames? This one did
Yep.
not have a deep seam. And I've still got the photo that I took on my hand afterwards, and you can see the outline, the shape of the seam in a soot
Oh.
mark all over my
Oh,
hand.
on your hand, it blew up in your hand.
Yep. And I thought it was just hilarious. It's the fact that I just imagined this little Japanese schoolgirl with her pink fairy lights plug it in and then just detonating forcibly. And that's why the theme of the channel, whenever I buy something that looks dangerous, I try and buy it in pink because there's just something so ridiculous about this
Yeah,
cheap
right.
plastic pink thing just being 240-volt and the 5-volt output and stuff like that.
And it would look great in the thumbnail, wouldn't it?
It does. It
How
does
much
look
work do you
good.
put into the thumbnail? Not much, just like me. You just sort of pick something that's meh,
In the past, I didn't even bother choosing a thumbnail, and basically it was two hands on a bench, and it was every single
Right.
picture looked identical. And then I remember seeing that YouTube said, "Hi, a thumbnail is quite important, and I thought, oh, I suppose I should do a thumbnail. So I will try and pose a thumbnail. And most recently, I've been adding text onto it, but using just a website called picfont.com that lets you just add
Yeah.
brightly colored text on the image and then basically download it. And it works pretty well. Works quite good. It's nice.
Yeah,
It does
I
look better.
occasionally yeah, if I think of something that might make a good thumbnail during the video, I might actually go to the effort to, like, set up a shot and angle the camera and then, shoot some video, and then I'll screen capture from that kind of thing. But most of the time, I just, choose something from the, actual video itself. But I'm always changing my camera angles and doing different things. So, I've got more choice than you do with the two hands kind of thing. So,
I usually do try to take a dedicated thumbnail picture because I think it's kind of important to do that because the
yep.
thumbnail is the advert for the video, if I was
Yes, of
being
course.
professional about it,
Makes a
really.
difference. I see your most popular video, though, is a simple guide to electronic components.
It is indeed. That's a surprise. It's nice. It
Yeah.
overtook Fanny Flambeau, which is really
Yes.
impressive.
What is that? I've seen it years ago. It's a doll that catches on fire or something. What's the
It is. It was
story
a
with
silly
that?
thing. It was designed just as the original Fanny Flambeau. It was just going to be a doll that smoke came out from under the dress. But then I thought, let's go all the way. It was designed as a viral video, and it succeeded that way. It was a doll out of
Oh.
Poundland with a hole in its butt and a cake fountain firework, and then I modified the packaging with basically printed out on glossy photo paper, added little bits and the little instruction book, and then just pretended that this was a doll out of a shop that had a flamethrower built in. I was trying to find the flamethrower, and it turned out it was basically under its skirt. And then faking surprise, but it did go viral.
Oh, so you set out to make a viral video with that?
I did. Yep.
That's interesting. Had you tried before and failed to
No.
make a viral?
Well, having a background in the entertainment industry, I know that things like the first take is the best take, so to speak.
Right.
It was also a lesson in things did go wrong in that video, but you just have to cover over them as, like you do in normal videos. But it was my first attempt at that, and it was just purely aimed, and it just kind of obviously it hit the correct buttons, and
Yep.
it
Right.
it worked.
So did you try again after that to make that same success, the viral?
I've not.
Oh,
I mean, the
okay.
most recent one, the whiskey one, was really spoofy, and it was done in the style of clickbait. But
I kind of yeah, right. Is that your latest one that I've
it's the latest one with the stripy hat and the sort
yes.
of the soy face and wall on the picture. Which, if you've actually watched, it's quite a short video, which is quite important as well. It has to be short to catch the attention of the masses.
Yep.
In the video itself, that is a frame from the video where I posed with the soy face while the whiskey's pouring into the still, and then I said afterwards, rather sarcastically, that I'd add the word "wall" for extra drama, and then did it.
And then you did it, and that's your thumbnail. I can see it now. That's a killer thumbnail. You've captured the soy face and the yeah.
It's a bit
And it works
embarrassing.
because
It
that got
does. It works.
289,000 views, and the one before it got 70,000, and the one
Yeah.
before that 120, which did pretty good, the pound lamp one. But generally you'll get around 50 or 70,000 views or something. So yeah, it works.
It goes up and down. Do you know, one of the worst things about the electronic videos is the more technical it is, the more serious it is, the less views it gets because it's got a more niche market.
Yep.
Sometimes you're better just going for a broader spectrum. And that's for Electroboom one outright because
Oh yeah.
he's got so many audiences
Nailed it.
there. Yep, he's got the sort of people there that don't really
Yep.
understand the technology. In fact, have you noticed when Electroboom does a deeply technical video, it actually gets less views because
Oh
people aren't
yeah, it
there for
gets
the
bugger all.
technology.
Yeah.
They're there to
Exactly.
see the funny guy with the unibrow blow himself up
Self up.
fundamentally.
That's it. So, yeah, I wouldn't like to be in that position where, well, it has its advantages and disadvantages. Like you can't just suddenly like start making a slew of like uninteresting videos to most of your audience. It's like when you're thankfully I built my channel based on just a huge mix of content. So it's like I still do a huge mix of content. So people are
That
still
works.
a bit disappointed, but at least I'm not pigeonholed into anything. So I can do pretty much anything I want, which means I'll never be successful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's it. The better your content is, in a sense, the more
Mm.
technical and more niche. Even though you're covering a broad spectrum, it's not quite puddie pie, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So is this your day job now?
It is now. I mean, particularly over the last years, I do still do real work, and I don't plan on giving that up because there's no security, as you know, with YouTube. Literally, do you remember the apocalypse?
Oh
Well, you couldn't
yes.
forget
Well,
the
which
apocalypse.
one? We're up to Adpocalypse 3 or 4, aren't we?
Absolutely, where they decide that technical channels and scientific channels like Cody's Lab and Nerd Rage are, and
Mm.
Now Red, and all the electronic channels that work with dangerous electrical stuff that
Ooh.
we're too dangerous, and the sense of the advertising. What comes to mind is Eric the Car Guy. It was a guy with a mechanical sort of car fixing channel.
Mm.
And when Apocalypse hit, he was affected so badly that from being a really huge channel, he just basically stopped making videos for a while. He was so jaded about the
Wow.
fact that basically his wage had just been terminated. Because that's what it was
Yep.
like at Apocalypse. It was like a daily job where you put the same amount of work in, but they suddenly give you a fraction of the wages. They say, we're just not paying you for those videos. And it's like, oh, yeah, there's no security. So
No,
I'm always
none.
going to keep doing real work because ultimately it is security that you're actually going to get a predictable income from that.
Exactly. And what is your day job? Has it been revealed before?
To a degree, I've done videos from behind the scenes. These days, it's firmly in the entertainment industry, working as a lighting technician on sort of fairly largish shows, prominently the Embra Military 2, which
Right.
is like hopefully happening this year. But at this point in time, because it's an event with lots of public at it, we don't 100% know what's happening yet.
Yeah. So is that how does that work? Are you like a freelance contractor, or are you contracted to some other outfit, or
Yeah,
what?
I've been freelance since the 90s. Not long after my apprenticeship, I went out and a government thing called Sim 14, where they were basically it was the brainchild of Margaret Thatcher, who decided that to protect her buddies in the construction industry from the complications of pensions and paid holidays, she would
Oh
encourage people to
no.
go,
Shock horror.
yeah, no, just terrible things. She'd encourage people to go self-employed. And actually, for some technical people, it worked out really well. It worked out well for me.
Right. Excellent.
It gave lots of variety. It meant I could, instead of working for one company, I could work for lots of different companies with a wide, diverse range of technical stuff, which just kind of worked out well for me. But
Got
so
it.
I work subcontract to a company called PRG, Production Resource Group, when I'm on the T2, and they basically hired by the day, so to speak.
Got it. So the production companies hire that company to produce, to do all the stage stuff, and then they subcontract you to as one of their lighting
That's it. One of their
people. Got
technicians.
it. Yep.
PRG are interesting because they have their own products. They manufacture their own lights, and they're ultra super high profile. They're lights that you can't actually buy. So the only way to get to play with them is to actually subcontract to them. And you get to play with very, very interesting equipment. Very good.
Mm. What is the difference between the cheap ass lights that the consumers actually play around with and the big industrial ones? The LED are they mostly switched over to LEDs, or are they still using arc lamps, or what?
They have not. They've got discharge lamps, but they run
Mm.
them from electronic ballasts that can actually overdrive the lamps. But in normal operation, if, say, for instance, the shutter closes, if the light effectively turns off, but it can't turn the discharge lamp off, a shutter will cross over the lamp, but the lamp will then cut to below its normal operating power to the point that it
Mm.
keeps it lit. Because otherwise, if it went out, it would have to go through the complete restrike procedure. It would have to cool down before it could restrike it.
Oh, okay, yeah, because they can't restart when they're hot.
That's it. You do get hot restrike, but it's quite nasty in the lamp. It causes major sputtering of the electrodes. It damages them.
Oh, so they don't so they want to avoid doing that for longevity's sake because these things are expensive, right?
Yes. So it's got built-in lamp timers, and it also has built-in power
Ah.
level settings that you can deliberately overdrive the lamp to quite a significant degree at the cost of lamp life. The increase in power results in a massive increase in light output. And beyond that, the optics are super precise. All the coated lenses, pretty much a
Hmm.
professional camera, but in the form of a light. They're just extraordinary compared to the cheap disco crap you get from China. They're very unusual. I've made a video about it. If you go on my channel and just do a search for Best Boy, you'll find one of the most interesting ones, and you'll see how much engineering is in it. It's spectacular.
Ooh. I'm going there right now. Oh, looking at up here, Best Boy automated light. Wow, that looks complicated.
It's stuffed. It's very complicated. The whole lot
What
is
the?
run, but it's modular. The people who designed that light were the same people who designed the original Vari lights, and they've been in the industry for a long time. And can you imagine a product that has actually been designed by people who actually have experience of repairing them in real life? So everything is designed for the engineer. It's a beautiful light. It's fantastic.
What are the spinning discs in there? Is this some sort of what's the what's the
It has a
deal?
stack of dichroic mirrors. You have what's
They're
called
mirrors.
they are, but they're dichroic mirrors. You have for the dimmer, it's a graduated standard silver mirror. So as it rotates, as the disc rotates, it dims it down so you can go from zero to full output. Then you have cyan, yellow, and magenta for mixing colors. So you can have any color from those by mixing, by positioning
Oh,
those graduated dichroic mirrors. And you also have CTO, which is correct to orange, which adjusts it to compensate for the metal halide bluish discharge to bring it more compatible with tungsten filaments, tungsten lights in the vicinity.
interesting. Wow, I had no idea they were that complicated.
Oh, they're huge inside. Fortunately, they have tons of diagnostics. And one of the nice features of that light is it's got what we call the brain is in a pull-out drawer that you can undo some fixings. You can basically replace the whole brain of the light in situ. That's got the computer and the memory backup battery. And it's not just the memory backup battery. If you go up to that unit and you press power on while the light isn't powered, you can
Mhm.
access the screen lights up and you can set addresses and you can access all the parameters and look at the past diagnostics even without plugging the light in. It's all geared up to maximum serviceability and usability.
That's insane. How much does something like that cost? How much does this big boy, Best
We're
Boy cost
talking in the region of £40,000 theoretically
for one light?
for one light, but you can't buy them. There is no price.
Oh,
And it's when you do something like you inadvertently break a dichroic disc in it, it's like that little horror of the cost of something you've just broken in it because it is
yeah.
custom to these lights.
Uh,
But as I say, you can't buy them anyway. They're made in-house because ultimately they make their money big time by hiring these out to big shows that tour the world.
oh, right. So the company will not sell them to you. They'll rent them to you. Is that the
Yes, they will. That's it.
got it. Okay. And where is this company based?
Everywhere. America and Australia. You'll find PRG in Australia.
Oh, okay. Right.
They're just all around the world. And do you know the weirdest thing about the company is that the management of the company turn up in sweatshirts and jeans with like Stetsons and things like that because I think they're
Right.
based in Texas.
Texas.
It's so laid back. It's just so weird. It's like the ideal company to work for because although it's
Yeah.
very professional, it just is also just technical. It's just laid back. It's very weird.
Right. What is the lumens output equivalent of a light like that? Is it lumens or is it lux in the industry? What are you guys?
Oh, I couldn't honestly tell you. These things do not bother me. That is for the lighting designer. I just hang the lights up there, set their dress, run all the
Got it.
cables in, and
Yep.
fix it, so to speak.
Right. So there's no lead equivalent to something like this, is there, in terms of like light output?
There are LED fixtures, but nothing compared to this. The throw of this, that's a problem we've got at the moment. On the Tattoo, part of the lighting is these moving lights. that give all the textures and colors in the stage. But we also have rows as a secondary backup for general illumination because it's also broadcast and television of power cans, traditional 1 kilowatt power cans. And the ban on tungsten filaments is just causing so many problems right now because nothing compares even to a traditional 1 kilowatt power can. We've tried loads of LED fixtures. These are used outdoor in quite stormy weather at times. Nothing
Mm.
compares for intensity, the beam shape, and also the ability to weather rain and things like that.
Wow. So so they put a blanket ban. They did that here, but I thought like things were exempt, like oven bulbs and things like there are exemptions. So there weren't any exemptions there for these industry lights.
They are exempt, but the manufacturers said, well, it's not really worth our effort
Oh,
making them anymore because
oh,
we're not going to
really?
make any
Oh,
money out of this because it's such a niche market now for the exempt industries. So they're trying to
wow.
push, and people are bringing out products. They're saying like it's just like a power can, and we try it on the job, and we aim it at the arena, and it doesn't. It's
It's
nothing
not the
like
same.
it. Yep.
Oh, gee. So what do you have to try and salvage them from the eBay or anywhere you can? What's the
The power cans themselves are absolutely fine, but we've got a huge stock of lamps, and we're working on the basis that by the time we get there, by the time we get down to the stock, something will hopefully have arrived that we can actually use as an alternative. But most of the lights on the job have gradually transitioned for just general washes of light. They have been going strongly in the direction of LED, where they're creeping in gradually over time.
Hmm. Interesting. So how far can these like I see one video where you're like up on the top of a stadium. Like you're up in the rafters in this gigantic outdoor stadium with one of these lamps. What is the spot distance at what a couple hundred meters these things can throw?
Okay, we have one of the lights is one of the versions is called a bad boy. And we actually use it as follow spots. And that's the effectively throw you get is just absolutely mind boggling. If you're up at that light and you're using the controls, this thing can put basically almost like a pin spot of like sub 1 meter or a couple of feet of light onto the stage at any distance, but it can widen up to the full to basically flood the whole arena. They're extraordinary, but their
Oh,
throw is
really?
absolutely staggering. That's why the LED can't compete because, as you know, the LEDs,
Mm.
you can get high power LEDs, but the advantage of the discharge lamp for the optics of these lights is all that light is being generated in a very tiny area, which is completely incompatible with LED technology.
Yes.
LEDs want to
Oh.
spread that over a large area. They can't handle hundreds of degrees of temperature.
Mm. Wow, that's just a meter, less than a meter at a couple of hundred meters. That's just and then you broaden out to light up, like almost 180 degrees.
Yep.
That's
If you
just
watch
crazy.
Yep, if you watch the video about the Best Boy and you look at because it's going in the video, it's actually going through its self-test routine, and it's got the multi-element lens, which is super ultra precise. To get the precision, it has little gold-plated pins that touch onto circuit boards with gold-plated pads, so it can get to basically 3D printer level accuracy, that sub-micron
Mm,
accuracy.
yep.
That's how accurate, and all the lenses are riding up and down with each other with very strict rules
Oh,
about what you can use to clean the lenses. It's like a Pentax or Olympus precision optical system in those. It's quite staggering.
unbelievable. Wow. So, you've done a lot of those, cob lamps, right? Those, cob LEDs, those large ones and stuff like that. What's the general consensus with those these days? Is it you get what you pay for or
Yeah, those. Do you know the thing that's most interesting that's changing those is the type of LED. Do you remember the first ones that basically had the LED chips, the little gold bond wires onto the
Mhm.
top? One of the most common failures was the little bond wire. Have you seen the flip chip LEDs? Well, you have, but you've not possibly realized you're looking at them.
I probably haven't realized, no. I only familiar with the bond wire type.
Okay, well, modern LEDs do not have bond wires. The bare chip itself has been designed in such a way that it can literally be soldered directly across two pads on a circuit board, but it's
Yeah.
like almost pick and place, but super microscopic. So these big cob arrays are basically these pick and placed bare LED chips that are then flow soldered and then covered in the phosphorylated gel. So the technology has evolved, but these are
Hmm.
great for large panels of illumination, but they're not great for the point source.
Right. Is there any like high temperature lead that is suitable for that sort of thing, or is that just not compatible with the semiconductor physics of LEDs, I guess?
Well, the thing I see being used these days in cars, like the BMWs, are using
Mm.
the laser powered LEDs,
Laser I've
where
seen. Yeah, was it your video on that? Somebody did a video on that.
I don't have that. Now, who was it did the
It was
laser one?
Mike. It might have been
It was
Mike's
Mike's
electric stuff.
electric stuff. It
Right.
was.
Yep.
And it's basically it's pointing a laser at the phosphor gel, and you think, well,
Yeah. What the
the
hell?
phosphor gel is not going to last very long. It's like designed to
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah, they're for those who don't who can't visualize this, just picture your normal lead, right? So it's an emitter lead surface, and then you have a laser that points in at the surface of the lead and then bounces off. Is that how it works? That's nuts.
The stimulation of the phosphor is basically a laser firing at the phosphor, and you think, well, I'm not convinced that that's going to be reliable over the long term. But then again, it is
No,
a BMW, so they're probably relying on that, quite frankly.
I'm sure they know what they're doing. Yeah, but
And it
oh,
will be very, very expensive to replace in the future, most likely.
although a bit of a non sequitur there, but that leads me to cars, Teslas. You've heard about some of the reliability. Have you heard about the like the screens in the Teslas are starting
I've
to fail?
not.
And yeah, because that's the whole thing. Like the Tesla has nothing but this gigantic touchscreen, right? Big
Uh-huh.
15-inch touchscreen or something. And they've come out and basically, when these started failing, I don't know what mechanism they failed in, but they came out and said, "Oh yeah, we only expected them to have like a 5-year lifetime anyway." It's
Oh,
like, well, okay. They basically admitted that publicly. That's nuts.
that's like modern houses that they say your house is only designed to last 10
Yeah.
years. And it's like, really? I expect it to last 100 years.
Oh, that's just
What do you think the failure mode is of their screens?
I couldn't imagine 'cause,
Prime
generally
suspect.
LCDs are
Hmm.
pretty reliable, so I don't
I'm
know
going to
what
make
the
a wild guess that
Yep.
it's the bond, that horrible little plastic strip that's got conductive glue glued onto the edge of it. You
Oh,
know how the
yes,
big
that's
screens
horrible
have
stuff.
that?
I've done a few videos on how they fail over time. There was
And you can,
Fluke's multimeters. No, they're Fluke's scope meter. Famously, all of them are dead now because of these
yeah.
strips. They actually use conductive glue to stick the membrane contacts down to the PCB, and they all just fail over time.
And you can heat it, you can rub it down to try and make
Yeah, yeah,
contact
you
again,
can.
but it's just
I've
going to be
done
a
a video on
temporary
that,
thing,
and
and then it just
yeah,
fails
I
again.
was able to fix it, and then yeah, sure enough, it lasted like a month, and then it was dead again. Yep.
That's like modern televisions. The large screen televisions, the LEDs are being absolutely grilled in them. When you first get your television, you have to turn the brightness down on it because it's just like
Mm,
they're designed to fail. Modern products are literally designed to fail really quickly just to keep the money rolling in.
because they want to use the lowest cost part, and it's going to cost more to engineer a better thermal solution, I guess,
No,
or no?
I think they just want it to fail relatively quickly so that it lasts
Right, so you
your.
have to buy a new one. You think it's actually deliberate, you reckon?
Absolutely. I've been looking at some of the modern LED lamps. Now, one of the trends, and it's fascinating in modern LED lamps, is that you're getting a standard sized lamp, but it's rated 15-watt LED, and you think, well, that's going to get really, really hot.
Yeah.
And inside, they've got a circle of LEDs, but the LEDs are multi chip. And typically, some of these LEDs measure 50 volts across the LED because they have the multiple chips inside a standard tiny little 2835 type package. But those absolutely bake. And people say, oh, yeah, it didn't even last a year. But who keeps the receipt and says,
Yeah, no.
excuse me, this lamp failed, it's not worth it? And how else could you sell a 10-watt LED lamp in Poundland or a dollar store that,
Yeah.
is so cheap? But I don't know if you see my recent videos that show you can hack them, that you can actually use a spudger to slice the top cover off, the sort of silicon glue that holds it on,
Yeah.
and there's just There's the current sense resistors, there's usually two in parallel, roughly the same value. If you just physically, without even desoldering, if you just snap one off or damage it, it halves the power rating of the lamp. And it doesn't half the light output because the efficiency is impaired by the fact they're driving them too
Ah,
hard. And then you can glue the cover back on and you end up with a dimmer lamp that's only running at 5 watts instead of 10 watts, but it's
yeah.
going to last massively longer.
And it's
It's
got what,
really,
80% of the output or something, does it? Or
I wouldn't say
what's
80%, but instead of
yep.
maybe running at 50% power, but it's actually putting out something more like 60% of the output instead of 50%.
Ah, right.
So you are getting less light, but it's going to last a lot longer, and you can always use two of them.
Now you've done a series on these Dubai lamps. Can you explain
Yes.
the deal with that? Because I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, okay. The Dubai lamp was a custom lamp made for the, is it the prince, the ruler of Dubai? That's I can't remember his name. It's Sheikh. No,
Sheikh
I'm not even going to try.
something
It's
Mohammed, I'm sure. Yeah, something
absolutely.
like that.
But he did a deal with Philips for a 10-year contract, I think it was, that they supplied a custom lamp that was the most efficient lamp in the world. And the circuitry is just spectacular in them. It uses two layers. It uses a capacitive dropper as the first stage, but it's got
Mm.
extra. Everything is in duplicate inside it. But it also has a little two-transistor linear current regulator that it's. Initially, I thought it was just to compensate for voltage fluctuations, but it looks as though it may actually be to compensate for ripple, so that there's not even ripple in the 50 hertz ripple, the capacitors that you'd normally
Which
expect.
can dry out the caps, of course, which can age the caps, of course, if you've got too much ripple.
Well, the capacitors aren't really stressed because they're only seeing the sort of, well, effectively it's double mains frequency, so it's 100 hertz, 120 hertz. So they're not really stressed as it is, and they've also got duplicate capacitors. But this thing
Mm.
can, although there's very little ripple to start off with, it gets rid of that, even that ripple, by dynamically regulating the two transistor circuit based on a standard bipolar transistor and a MOSFET. But the real secret to the longevity and efficiency is the fact it uses 4 times as many LEDs as normal. So whereas you can buy out your local supermarket, you can buy the 4 watt filament LED lamps that have the 4 filaments with 1 watt rating each.
Yep.
If you bought the same filament lamp as a Dubai lamp, it would have 16 filaments in it. They'd be running them at a quarter watt each. And that increases
Ah.
efficiency and increases the longevity. They're very
But
stylish.
much
It's a
but
very,
more expensive, of course, because you're doubling up on your capacitors, you're doubling up on your LEDs and stuff
I
like
would
that.
expect so. But it's upset the lighting designers in Dubai, the architects and lighting designers, because they've been told you don't have any real choice but to use these lamps. And they're only available in 2 color temperatures and 1 watt, 2 watt, and 3 watt. And also you can't
Which is
dim them, which is,
tiny.
but you say it's tiny, but a 2 watt Dubai lamp puts out theoretically as much light as a 4 watt Australian or British or
Really?
American lamp, because it
Ah.
is resulting in much greater efficiency from the circuitry and the LEDs. I think they've also cheated that though by restricting the color rendering index, which means they've used phosphors in the LEDs that are more pronounced peaks at the peak of the eye's spectral sensitivity, but sacrificed color rendering, quality of color of what they're lighting in the process.
So they appear brighter in quote marks because of the non-linear nature of the eye and stuff like that. So the eye is very poor at gauge in intensity and stuff like that. Because the
It
eye,
is.
for those who don't know, is I believe it is the world's largest dynamic range sensor. Is the human eye, I
It's
think.
ludicrous. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
it, you can go out in bright sunshine. I'm not going to recommend people look at the sun, but you could glance across the sky with the sun in your vision, and then you can go into a
Mm.
pitch black room and have one LED running at 1 milliamp in that room, and it'll still
Yeah.
light the room. It's
It's
ridiculous,
crazy.
the range of the eye.
Wow. So it's not. So why hasn't anyone else done this? Once again, it's the market. They wouldn't sell as many, right?
A, it's more expensive to make, and B,
Yeah.
it's designed to last. It's underrunning the LEDs, it's not grilling them, it's going to last for ages. I think the only
Mm.
reason that Philips got involved in that is ultimately because they were offered a fairly lucrative 10-year contract.
Yep.
I would not be surprised if they don't release that to anywhere else in the world because
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense. It's like basically shooting yourself in the foot as a manufacturer. You're not
Yep.
going to make money from the lights by selling products that last forever.
Well, have you seen the recent, I think it's fairly recent, Veritasium video on the history of lights and how they're designed to fail?
Yes. Now, what was it the Phoebus cartel? I
Something
think it
like that.
was.
Yeah. And this is not a conspiracy thing. This is all documented, you know, real stuff. They actually had, and it was known back in the day. They actually, and it was government regulated or something too, wasn't it?
But there is a practical aspect, a technical aspect to that as well. Because if you got a tungsten lamp of that era and you
Mm.
overdrove it, you could increase the output. Do you remember the photo flood lamps that used to be really, really bright? They were used for photography.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep.
But you sacrificed, you got a much higher intensity, much greater efficiency, but they were much dimmer. Not dimmer, they didn't last as long. Their lifespan was rated in hours. And likewise, you get the rough service building site lamps that are underrun in the filaments, and they can last for, well, they're just designed to be more rugged. They're designed to take
Mm.
impacts and bumps. But if you get a rough service lamp and you put it in your house, it will last for like 5, 10,000 hours as opposed to the 1,000 hour lamp. But you'll pay a lot more in the long run with electricity because the efficiency of the output drops dramatically.
Right.
If you turn your dimmer down to 50% to the midpoint of the sine wave, so the lamp's getting 50% power, you're not getting 50% the light. The
Yes.
efficiency drops way down to something like 10 or 20%. So the Phoebus cartel, kind of that 1,000 hour was really an optimum level at which you had a good long lifespan and a good efficiency, but it was a nice sort of middle of the road type of level. So it wasn't
Mhm.
100% conspiracy, but it was a bit of conspiracy as well.
And you think they do it you think it's probably deliberate these days that people are designing these products to fail?
Yeah, well, do you remember the old days when modern electronic, the old electronic components that you had to keep them cool, or they'd
Yep.
fail really, like it was something like 75 degrees, they'd start failing. You look at
Uh-huh.
the modern LED lamps, the temperatures are so hot that you can actually smell baked components in
Yeah,
them,
I know.
and it
Oh, it's disgusting.
that started. You know what it's like when you get a failed compact fluorescent lamp, you open it up, and the circuit board is brown
Bl
inside. The components are all brown. You
Yeah.
think, how are those transistors even still working in that? Because
Yep.
it's that charcoal burnt smell, this sort of phenolic
Oh,
smell. Yeah, that's how they're driving LEDs these days. They're really pushing them right up to the limits.
that's insane. Why? I can't imagine being a design engineer at one of these companies. I can't imagine them actually sitting around a table and going, "Right, we have to design a lamp that doesn't last for more than 1,000 hours." I'm sure it's not that open because engineers are just gonna go, "But no."
The engineers don't have any choice over this. If the engineers
Yep,
were left to their own devices, we'd have forever lamps, and the
yep.
marketing department would be very displeased about that.
Yes. I'm sure it's more subtle though. I'm sure it's not they're not deliberately told to design 1,000 hour or a couple 100 hour lamp, but they're coerced,
I
I guess.
think
They're
I
massaged
think
into.
they are.
You
I'm
reckon?
pretty sure they are because the earliest lamps, the earliest LED lamps when they were still a novelty, they're still lit. Many of them are still
Yeah,
working.
yes.
And the
Yes.
modern ones, you look at them, I mean, go to your local dollar store and buy an LED lamp and open
Oh,
it
they're
and
shocking.
take some temperature measurements. And it's admirable, the circuitry in them, but you think it's such a waste because all the work went into this aluminum substrate PCB and the heat
Mhm.
sinking and these LEDs, and yet it's going to be dead within a year. And
Yeah.
it must be engineered because it's so precise that literally they have to allow also for the fact it's going to be some of them are going to be in open lights like a table light, others are going
Mm.
to be in recessed downlighters where they're actually in the hot ceiling. So there must be a sort of delicate balance, but yeah,
Mm.
they are designed to fail. That's fundamental. They're maximum
I'm
bang.
Right. I'm looking at the schematic for the Dubai lamp, and it's got one bipolar transistor and one MOSFET. They didn't duplicate the MOSFET. They only put the lead strings in parallel for redundancy.
Yes, they just use one regulator circuit at the end, but you'll also
Mhm.
notice there's Zener diodes that bypass that in the
Yes.
event that something goes wrong with that or that
Oh,
its
if the
range is
transistor
exceeded.
fails, it'll still give output.
Yes. Can I also mention there's a slight
Ah.
error on that schematic? It says 470k resistors in series to
Yep.
470k. Are
Mhm.
4.7 megohm because
Oh,
initially I
okay.
looked at that as a standard linear current regulator with the two bipolar transistors. I didn't
Mhm.
realize initially that was a MOSFET because when I tested it on the circuit board, just because of other components in the vicinity, it tested out at zero point 0.6 volts, as if it was a
Yeah,
bipolar
right.
transistor. And it's only afterwards when I had to take that transistor off the board because I was like thinking, this isn't right. I had to take it off and put it on a component tester to actually work out what it actually was.
Mm.
Found out at the MOSFET, and then the value of the resistors makes sense. Those two 4.7 megohm resistors plus the lower value one in the divider
Yep,
actually stops the gate voltage going too high to the point it would damage the MOSFET. So that
got
kind
it.
of makes sense,
Yep,
but I didn't realize that at the time.
right. Ah, interesting. I mean, if I was designing this and price was no object, I'd be duplicating everything. I'd be duplicating my diode bridge. I'd be duplicating my caps as they've done. They've put they've put two 4.7 mics in parallel. The input capacitive divider, they've put four in parallel there.
Yeah, they've put 4 in parallel. 2 are the high value, they're the
I
main
was going to
current
say,
dropper
why are they
capacitors,
different values?
and then there are 2 little ceramic capacitors. The only thing I can think of is that's to protect the metal film capacitors from spikes. Not really sure.
Or is it an RFI thing? Is it a
It
no?
could be,
Because
but
this thing's not
capacitive
switching. So
droppers, yeah, capacitive droppers are one
yeah,
of the quietest lamps. That's incidentally,
yes.
that's another nice thing about these linear regulator lamps with the linear regulator circuits.
Mm.
They're very quiet from a
Yeah,
RF
there's no
noise
switching
perspective.
stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm. Yeah, I would double up on everything, assuming that you had the space and you had the,
Oh, that's the problem,
luxury of
isn't it? That
yeah.
you've basically got that tiny little base. I took the 1 watt lamp apart as well, and it also had similar circuitry, but it wasn't duplicated simply because they were trying to squeeze it into a much smaller
Yeah.
area, but it had more or less the same circuitry.
Right. Oh.
It's the curse of LED lamps is the base size. I could see a future where houses actually have a 24-volt lighting bus going round them instead of
Really? Okay. Yep. A lot of people have talked about that over the years. It's like, everything in our house is DC. Why don't we have a DC distribution points? Why is it
as
240 volts?
Edison originally wanted. There was a point in Glasgow that one side of one of the main roads in Glasgow, Western Road, was DC and the other side was AC
Really?
when the electrical industries were having their fight to see which one. And ultimately, it's Westinghouse and Tesla that won with the AC supply because it was
Mm.
just more practical for transformers and motors and things like
Yeah, of
that.
course. Yep. So that was always going to win out. But yeah, people have talked about like at the house level. I guess it's like, why don't we have DC outlets? Hmm.
Having a lighting power supply with a power factor corrected power supply, a modular one that could just be clipped into a holder, and then just the 24 volts running around the lighting, because that would
Yep.
not only be a safety aspect, but it means that dimming would be so much easier because pulse width modulation would be much easier as opposed
Mm.
to the phase angle control, because traditional phase angle control dimmers are completely incompatible with modern electronics. They're so
Yeah.
nasty and spiky, and
Yeah.
they're just and flickery. They're just not ideal. So the DC
Oh.
would have advantages there.
Well, but everything, yeah, people want the Internet of Things crap these days. They want to control their lights from their bloody shoe phone.
It's just like so much electronic stuff stuffed permanently into walls and ceiling fixtures. It's a fire hazard, and
Yeah.
B, it's a hacker's playground. Am I just being cynical because I'm old that stuffing random bits of software onto
Yeah.
your home network just seems like a bad idea?
It's a bad idea. It isn't just you. It is demonstrably a bad idea. But I think like the novelty is going to wear off. I don't see the future of internet connected light bulbs. I just don't see it. Once a novelty wears off, it's like,
You
the
just don't know
switch is
what's
just
going to
easier.
happen. Yeah, because ultimately now they're talking in the UK, the wiring regulations used to say you cannot run a feed to a light via the switch because you can't have live and neutral at the switch in case people run sockets off it. They just mount a socket next to the switch and use that
Oh,
power.
right. Yep.
But so it used to be that the power could only run up to the ceiling rows and then you had a switch wire going down to the switch. But now that's
Mm.
changing because now, of course, you need power at the switch because the switches are all
Mm.
filled with computers that are prone to crashing for some reason. And also,
Have Yeah, go on.
there's the other thing that now that's kind of irrelevant because you get even Wi-Fi enabled circuitry that can operate on a slight leakage across the lamp. You can put a capacitor across the light and it just passes that 1 or 2 milliamps that means that you don't need the neutral down at the switch anymore because it can actually just power itself from being part of the circuit, so to speak.
I've had that as well. I was gonna do a video on it where I replaced an old-fashioned filament, like, it was outside, it's one of those porch light things, it was an old filament lamp. I replaced it with a, LED lamp, and it was always partially on. And of
Oh,
course, it was yeah, it's
snubber
the wire
networks.
yeah, well, it's the wiring no, it's the wiring capacitance. The capacitance of the wiring at 50 hertz was enough to put a couple of hundred microamps or tens of, yeah, a couple hundred microamps into the lamp and light it up.
This is
Like,
why many lamps actually have a 1 megohm resistor after the bridge rectifier to try and shunt that down to try and add
oh,
that load.
okay. Yep.
But the worst for that is two-way lighting, two-way switching or multi-way switching because you end up with a big long run of the switch cable
Run of
going to all
cable, and
these
that's got, what, tens of that's got, how many puff of capacitance is that? It's a lot.
Oh, talking of capacitance, I've been playing about with ozone generators recently, and one of the ways of generating ozone is to get a piece of ceramic material and have an electrode on either side and
Hmm.
basically couple high voltage cross capacitively, and it creates a corona discharge. So I was thinking it'd be really interesting just getting a ceramic capacitor and basically dissolving the resin and using that little disc and seeing if you could turn a disc ceramic capacitor into an ozone generator. And it did not
Ah.
work. But
Didn't
worse than
work.
that, no, it
Okay.
didn't. It was a strange brown ceramic inside,
Yeah.
and the coating on each side, it was just basically a printed metallic disc on either side of the ceramic formed the capacitor. But it was just basically almost like a conductive ink that as soon as the resin was dissolved off, the wires fell off as well. But more interestingly, I looked at it and thought, that's tiny little discs, and the capacitor material is about 0.5 millimeter thick. So I then got equivalent. I got some copper foil and stuck it either side of a piece of paper, thinking it was going to be equivalent capacitance, and it was nowhere near. It was like a
No,
fraction of a nanoamp. And yet, somehow, in these tiny ceramic capacitors, what is so special about the dielectric that makes the capacitance value so high? I don't know
it's
how they're
magic
achieving that.
woo-foo. It's like, yeah, that's why they have the Wi-Fi dielectrics, and they're horrible dielectrics. Like, they're absolutely, like, they change with temperature and voltage. They're absolutely enormous. But yeah, that's how you can get 100 microfarads in a bloody 0603 or something these days. When I was a boy,
Yeah,
geez,
it kind of ruined the project. I had this big idea. I was going to make an ionizer where the capacitors were just pads on either side of a double-sided circuit board with just the
Right,
diodes,
yeah,
and that was it. A classic Cockcroft-Walton multiplier. And
right.
then when I tested it, when I got a piece of circuit board material and stuck foil on it to test that, and it was like nowhere near the
No,
size of
no,
those little
it's
pads on those
yeah.
capacitors. So that kind of blew that whole project out the window.
No, it's a dielectric constant. It's just magic material science woo woo. It's incredible, unbelievable. But they're absolutely horrid. Back when I was designing underwater acquisition stuff, we needed high values of capacitance for AC coupling caps, but they had to be completely linear, so there couldn't be any of this newfangled. So this newfangled dielectric constants. They had to be the strictly controlled, non temperature dependent dielectrics, right? And the biggest we could get at the time was like 2.2 nanofarads or something, and it was like we had to string a bunch of these in parallel. Nowadays, so you can get the same ceramic dielectric material, but in like 100 nanofarads or something. It's just nuts, the material science progress in that area.
I will say that's an area of failure I see an awful lot is those multi-layer ceramic capacitors, though.
Oh,
The ones
yes.
because they're so fine now, the layers are so thin that the slightest stress or fracture
Yeah.
turns them into a resistor.
I've done a video on that, and it's horrible. You can get special ones with little flex terminations built into them. Little
Okay.
flexible. Yeah, they're designed for the automotive industry and high vibration industries. They're a multi-layer ceramic capacitor that the end caps on them that sold to the PCB, they're actually like kind of like floating. They're kind of like wobbly. It's got this
All right, okay.
flexible end thing to take out the stress.
But I see things like, like you get a passive infrared detector, battery operated, and its quiescent current should be really low, but it's just eating the batteries. And the culprit is always the first little ceramic capacitor across the battery
Yeah.
is just basically just discharging it. And with the thermal imaging camera, in a in sort of thermally dark environment, you could actually see that capacitor just glowing in the thermal imaging camera, that
Really?
tiny
You could
fraction of a
see it?
degree. Yeah, you can.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. That's incredible. I didn't think you'd get the temperature resolution for that. I didn't. Wow, that's incredible. Leakage through the capacitor. You can see thermally.
Yeah, because it's acting as a resistor, so,
Yeah,
it's tiny, it's like it might just be 1 or 2 milliamps, but it is actually having that effect, and it just makes
right.
that slight contrast.
Oh, fascinating. Oh boy, yeah, because they get the fake capacitors are one of the biggest failure modes. Either multi-layer ceramic capacitors or the electrolytics, as you know. Have you ever seen tantalums in LED lamps?
Have I? What was that recently I was looking at? Oh, you know what it was? It was in a RCD, earth leakage circuit breaker,
Mm.
they've got their different names, GFCI in America.
Yeah, there's tons of them. Yep.
The only electronics in it were a tantalum capacitor or two and a resistor network in series with the coil between the sense coil and the trip coil, and they presumably just use them for size, but they'd actually be seeing AC, which is odd.
Yes, you wouldn't be using a tantalum in that.
There were diodes,
Hmm.
but it still didn't really inspire much confidence, but they did
No,
seem to be
no.
tantalum-style capacitors. I try and avoid them. I remember going through a phase of using tantalum capacitors because they were so much smaller than the electrolytics,
Oh,
but
yes,
when it
back in the
comes to
day. Oh,
crunch, I'd rather use
yep,
electrolytics, to be honest.
yep, yep. And you can get solid electrolyte material these days. It's all the gamer kiddies want their motherboards to have, solid tantalum capacitors and,
I wonder how many of them are
solid.
actually solid electrolyte as opposed to actually just liquid electrolyte and just being
Yeah,
told they're solid.
it's solid. Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe there's a conspiracy teardown video idea
We could
there,
have a
perhaps.
grump about this how stuff from the 1980s that ran at 50 or 60 hertz and the big, huge, fat electrolytics, and they're still working to this day. And you get the
Yep.
modern circuitry with they just absolutely bake their brains out. I mean,
Yep.
bulging electrolytics didn't happen unless you had a bit of an instant in the past. Now it's
Yep.
just the first thing
Yeah,
you look for is like failed
exactly.
capacitors.
Oh, you remember the reefer caps?
Oh,
The
yes, the gold ones. I used them in some of my products, but fortunately, I've never ever had reports of them bursting into flames.
yes, they went into everything in everything in the 70s and 80s. Those reefer mains caps. It
Yeah,
was
fortunately, they weren't connected directly across the main incoming supply. Oh, they
okay.
were.
Oh
They
yes,
were.
yes
They
they
were
were,
suppression
and
capacitors. They were the
yep,
X2,
yep,
and what
exactly.
better place? Unlimited
Yeah.
power to blow up with, and they used to just burst into flames inside the equipment.
That's what you need, a whole grid behind you to supply all that energy to
Absolutely.
explode your capacitor into flames. Oh, fantastic. Oh, brilliant. LED lights, geez, I it's a whole niche you've built an entire audience on cheap Chinese LED lamps, I think. It's
They've
incredible.
been evolving quite quickly. Initially, sometimes I think I must run out of content for the channel, and it's like, no, there's a backlog. It's so huge. It's just like this endless supply of LED lighting and tat. It's just like, it's just
Yeah.
always there.
Well, I can remember one of our early Amp Hour episodes, we're talking 8, 9 years ago now or something. Been going 10 years now, I think. Anyway, one of the early ones was, oh, I forget his name, the CTO of Cree was on the amp
Oh,
hour,
right,
CTO
okay.
of Cree, and we're talking about LEDs back then, and they were still like just as little as 10 years ago. They were still sort of newish technology. They hadn't made a pervasive thing into the home lighting sector and all sorts of stuff. People still using their compact fluoro lamps, and it's amazing in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it took so long for the blue LED to be cracked, and ultimately, although
Mm,
they've developed it, it's a completely different technology. Because you remember the old red and green gallium arsenide, gallium phosphide LEDs were a big chunky
yeah.
crystal like a diode, and they were super reliable. Then comes along the new technology, and it it was good to have the blue, and it's very high output, but it's based in
Yep.
thin film technology that is actually less reliable than the old LEDs. So, like the
Mm,
blue and green and white introduce new failure modes. I think a lot of people have been caught out by that, where they've built products based on them, and then they've discovered LEDs can actually fail after all.
fail.
And they,
Yeah.
yep, some just fail straight out the bag, so to speak, particularly when they're
Yeah.
bought off eBay in bulk.
The blue LED was so important a development, it won the Nobel Prize in physics. That's how important it was. I can't remember who developed it, but
Oh, it was
yeah.
the guy who did it with Nokia, who, no, Nokia, that's wrong. Nichia, should I say, similar. It was the guy who developed the Nichia that won it, but it was Cree developed at the same time. But I
Oh,
think
did they? Okay.
Nichia specialized in the sapphire substrate, was it not? And Cree were using the silicon carbide
Oh,
substrate.
could be. Yeah. Yep. I forget the history there, but I think there were rivalries. Hmm.
Because I can remember just out the blue, in a local electronics shop, Maplin, suddenly, before like blue LEDs hadn't been available, at the same time they arrived, they suddenly had red, green, and blue moving message display signs actually made by Cree were available, which was
Yeah.
just out the blue.
And I can remember. Do you remember the craze when, as soon like when blue LEDs became available to the design market, every designer put a blue LED in something. It was, and they made it as bright as possible.
I reckon I may have
Oh,
got the first blue LED on the BBC. I might be wrong here.
oh, really?
I put it in a clock
How so?
that it was a clock which just had basically had an LED pendulum and it had LEDs round the hour positions, but a standard clock movement. And a prop department saw the clock in my house and asked if they could borrow it and used it in a sort of educational program. So
Right.
it was one of those first LEDs that cost £10 for one 5 millimeter LED.
One
So there was
LED.
only one LED. So I reckon that was
Right.
one of the first to actually make it to TV.
Wow. There you go. Oh, fascinating. Oh my goodness, LEDs. We'll have to get the Cree CTO back on after a decade to see how things
Absolutely. That would
have
be
interesting.
interesting. Yep.
Yeah,
Are
because
they
that's
still
just
maintaining a foothold, particularly with companies
yes.
like Epistar, the
Oh,
Chinese
Epistar,
LED,
there's lots of them. Yeah, Epistar's one of them.
and all the litigation that went on because
Oh, was there?
oh, absolutely.
Who sued
Epistar
who?
may have. Oh, everybody was suing each else. It was like Nietzsche and Epistar and Cree were suing the pants off each other because Epistar was just having, well, imagine this, a Chinese company, it was just having utter disregard for
Yeah.
patents at the time.
Oh, shock horror.
Yeah, imagine that happening.
Could you even have success in suing a Chinese company? I imagine
Oh,
it's going to be
what can you
pretty
do?
hard.
Absolutely not. It would, you'd never ever be able to sue a Chinese company because they're so flash in the pan. You know, first you'd have to find them and there's all little tiny companies. A lot of the disco lights that you buy from China, the sort of moving head
Mhm.
disco lights, they're based on standard components, but there's lots of little companies literally working out their living rooms, just building these lights up. So
Yeah.
if you order 5 of this model from one company and then maybe a year later you order another 5, the software and the hardware will be completely different because they just use whatever components they can get at the local market.
It's amazing. It's incredible.
I have to get over to China at some point. Just
Yep. Yes,
Shenzhen.
I actually, yeah, regret that I didn't go sooner to Shenzhen. And yep.
It looks my type of
Mm,
place. It looks very technical and cyberpunky. Like it's very
yep.
much Naomi Wu fits in absolutely perfectly in that place. It just has that feel to it, that industrial sort of image.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible what you can do there. And yeah, they literally do work from their kitchen table or from, 2 square meters in this giant, they've just got things packed to the rafter and
A big grey factory with the tables all laid out and just people in their little, like,
yeah.
lab coats sitting soldering all day long.
Oh, it's remarkable. Yep. I doubt we'd be able to do the same thing here. It's just it's not in our nature, is it?
It's
I
red tape would get in the way, they'd
Yeah, red tape would get
just
in the
a
way
wall, like,
and labor
even
laws and all sorts of, pesky things like that.
I'd love a big, huge industrial unit here to put all my stuff into and film all my videos in, maybe even just have a little sort of living area in it. But I just could not
Yep.
afford that because it's just everybody's speculating property to the point that industry
Oh,
can't even exist in our countries anymore.
really? So you're in the Isle of Man?
Oh, the Isle of Man is just investment central. So much
Really?
property is just bought by people purely as investment, which means the people who live here can't afford to buy a house. They have to rent it instead from these people that are speculating on it.
Yeah, well, it's not that different here. Although just yesterday, woohoo, I got a
Mhm.
second storage unit. I got a storage unit downstairs in my lab building here. I got a 32 square meter storage unit.
But did you buy it or are you
I
renting
bought
it?
it. No, 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 bought
Oh,
it.
right, okay.
I've been waiting 10 years for one of these to come up in the
Oh,
building
that's
since I
good.
bought this lab. Yep, because normally people hold these things like gold, like they just hoard these things. But yeah, a company was selling their unit and they were selling and it had a separate title. It already had a separate title for the storage room. And I went, "Can I buy the storage room?" And they went, okay." So,
Can I
yep.
predict though,
Oh.
you're going to fill it with shelving and then you're going to absolutely fill it with technical stuff.
Oh, everything. Not only technical stuff, all the stuff in the dumpster is going in there,
Every square inch must be
Yep,
filled with technical stuff. You
yep.
must surround yourself with technical stuff. It's the correct thing to do.
It is, I know. But it's great. I've now got I can wheel stuff on the trolley from the dumpster room straight to my storage
Oh,
unit.
right, okay. That means
Oh,
bigger
oh,
stuff now.
bigger stuff, more stuff. Yep. Yep. It's just great. Whereas, my little 50 square meter windowless office that I'm in here now, you know, it's okay, but it's not big enough to hoard. So, yeah, I need places to hoard. I could get, like, if I go out in the western suburbs, if I want to drive far enough out west, I can get, like huge amount of space for not much money, but it's, it's the inconvenience of the travel and stuff like that. So, yeah, pain in the butt. So what made you move to the Isle of Man?
I didn't really have much choice. My mum had Alzheimer's, so me and my brother moved across to look after her, and that's fundamentally why I moved across.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Spent a lot of time nursing her. That's how the channel ended up happening as well, because when I built how one of the first things you need to do when you move into a house is build a bench so you have a workplace.
Of course.
Because I like watching general technical channels, I thought, okay, I like to give back to the internet what I take. So I just thought, well, I'll have initially it was an iPad pointing straight down, add some
Mm.
lighting, and I'll just make videos just because this is what I do. I take stuff to bits and
Yeah.
I'll video it and put it up on the internet. Didn't realize it was going to be quite so popular.
I
So that's kind of how that
Same here,
happened.
I thought if I got oh, I go, I thought imagine if I had 1,000 people watch me. Holy shit, that'd be amazing.
A
Like,
thousand was a
that was
great
my
milestone.
that was big back in 2009 if you had 1,000 subs, that was a
I
big
never even
deal.
thought I'd get to 100,000. It seemed impossible to get that silver
Yeah.
play button. It was in the distance.
Yep. No, you've smashed it. So would you do you think you appeal to a fairly broad audience? I think it'd be broader than mine, perhaps.
I don't think so. I
No?
think we both appeal to a similar group. You'll find that a lot of people view, say, your channel and my channel and Electro Boom and Julian and Fran,
Mhm.
and it's quite a closed technical group, the technical
Oh,
family.
for sure, yeah.
But I don't think my videos appeal out with that other than just sort of as a freak video from time to time. So it is a fairly
The occasional video, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a niche market. We're never gonna be PewDiePie by any stretch of the imagination,
Nope. Nope.
but you wouldn't want to be because there is a point it gets so big that it actually stops being personal. It gets just
Mm, yeah,
awkwardly
totally.
big. Yep, and it basically takes a bit of the fun out of it and the personality, so to speak.
No, I pride myself in that once I stop not caring about reading or replying to the comments or reading or replying to email, that's the day I give it up, I think. That's the
Absolutely,
day the
because
joy will go from it. So,
I like it. If I say, for instance, I left a comment on your channel, on one of
mm,
your videos, and you replied, that still feels personal. That feels
yeah,
nice.
exactly.
And it's
Yep.
such an important thing, to actually get that feedback. It just makes a channel more special than those channels that are just so big that they don't even bother looking at the comments.
I don't know how you could get that big on YouTube and not read, not even go to not even be half-assed enough to like heart a comment on every video. Like,
It's a
take 2
different
seconds to
market. I mean, you look
uh,
at the non-technical channels and you look down at the comments and it's just arrogant as the comments. It's just
yep.
gibberish. It's just people ranting in the comments, and you wouldn't actually want to go down there. At least with us,
Right.
it's technical people, and it's
Exactly.
actually worth looking at the comments and replying to them.
Except if you do a 5G video.
Absolutely, yes. And then you have to turn the comments off. Yeah, the copy paste warriors.
I have not had to turn the comments off once yet. I'm pretty proud of that, but might have come close.
And when I did turn the comments off and put in a description of the video why I'd turned the comments off, it was the fact that people had been bombing every single comment with copy and paste,
Ugh.
pointing to all the inverted commas, peer-reviewed science, close inverted
Yes.
commas, where all the people that had reviewed the science were all friends and in the business. Even when I'd put that and turned the comments off, they just found my most recent video and let rip on that instead.
Right. Oh
Lovely.
god. Oh, YouTube for the win. Oh, just
Absolutely.
yep. Oh well, Big Clive, our amp hour is up, mate. Thank you very much for joining us.
It whizzed by, as it always
It
does,
does.
doesn't it, really?
It
Yep.
it does. Yeah, time
Talk
flies.
technical and just time flies. This is why my streams end up 3 hours or more. They're just
3 hours
ridiculous.
long. Yeah, I've done a 5 hour stream once. That was like, oh, yep,
And you
yep.
don't set out planning to do that length of stream.
No,
It
you
just
just
happens.
get
It's just a
carried away
time.
answering
Yeah,
questions. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
yeah.
So easy to do with technology because it's
Oh,
just such a massive area.
yep. All right. Well, thank you very much, mate. Where can people find you? Obviously, I will link in your YouTube channel. Are you on the Twitteries, the
I'm not
Twitterverse?
on Twitter. No, I'm not on Twitter.
Hence, you're sane. So,
YouTube,
yep.
yeah, absolutely. But there's bigclive.com and there's also
.com.
Big Clive Live if you want to
Big
see my
Clive
ugly
Live. I'll link
face.
that one in too. So that's just live videos. I should probably do that. I should get off my ass and have a dedicated live channel, maybe. So does that work? Does that work?
Yes, because it's just technical people in the pub. It's basically a couple of thousand technical people. It varies between 1,000 and 2,000 people at the weekend.
That's a
Imagine, I
lot.
encourage them, bring a drink, bring a snack, and just chill out. And sometimes it's technical,
Mm.
sometimes it's not. It just goes in random directions. But imagine it as a big pub meeting. That's the
Yep.
best way to look at it.
I'm gonna have to. Yep. I'm gonna have to try it because I don't like. Well, I've got a second channel for that, which if I do a live show, I'm probably going to do it on my second channel, which is a catch-all channel for just random crap I put up.
And we should do more of those Zoom meetings because that was quite fun as well.
Yes, that was
And it
fun.
worked really well. But
Yep.
drag Fran in against her will.
Yes, against a will. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. All right. Thank you very much, mate.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Catch you next time.